When we think about the great civilizations of the past, we often think of the Greeks, the Romans, or the Egyptians. But on the other side of the world, high up in the Andes Mountains, another remarkable civilization thrived. One that built cities in the clouds, worshipped the sun, and passed down stories that were never written, only spoken. Welcome to the world of the Incas. Before we dive into the mythology of the Incas, let's talk about the Incas as a people, because understanding their worldview helps us to better understand their oral traditions. The Inca civilization flourished in South America, particularly in present-day Peru, from the early 13th century until the Spanish conquest in the 16th century. But first of all, the word Inca originally only referred to the ruling elite, the emperor and his kin. The Incas themselves called their empire Tahuantinsuyu, which means the four regions united. It reflected the way they structured their vast territory, which at its peak stretched from modern-day Colombia all the way to Chile. The empire was divided into four major regions that all converged at Cusco, the capital city, which the Incas considered the center of the world. These four suyus or regions were Chinchaysuyu in the northwest towards modern-day Ecuador, Antisuyu in the northeast toward the Amazon jungle, Calasuyu in the southeast, including parts of Bolivia and Chile, Kuntisuyu in the southwest towards the Pacific coast. The Inca civilization did not have a traditional writing system like those of the Mayans, Egyptians, or Mesopotamians. Instead, they used a unique and highly sophisticated system based on knotted strings called quipus. Inca society was a tightly organized system centered around the divine authority of the Sapa Inca, who was considered to be the living son of the sun god Inti. Daily life revolved around agriculture, and the state managed all the land, labor, and resources through a tax system not based on money but on labor called mita. Like most early civilizations, most people were farmers living in small communities and working collectively, while a powerful noble class oversaw administration, religion, and military affairs. Despite lacking a writing system or the wheel, the Incas built a highly efficient and interconnected society, sustained by a deep sense of duty, ritual, and communal responsibility. But what really shaped the Inca worldview was their deep spiritual connection to nature. Mountains, rivers, stars, and the sun weren't just natural elements, they were sacred beings. The Incas believed the world was animated by spirits called huacas, which could reside in stones, trees, or other places. Every action, planting crops, weaving cloth, even going to war, was tied to maintaining harmony with these forces. They lived in cycles. Life wasn't linear, but a series of repeating patterns, closely tied to agriculture, astronomy, and cosmic balance. Everything was about reciprocity. Humans gave to the gods, and the gods in return provided rain, fertility, and protection. Unlike the Romans or the Greeks, the Incas didn't write down their stories in books or scrolls. Their stories lived through people, passed down by word of mouth, generation after generation. Now, like we already saw, the Incas did have a kind of writing system called quipus, which were bundles of knotted strings, but these weren't used to write poems or record stories. Instead, quipus were mainly used for practical purposes like keeping track of harvests, taxes, and population counts. There really wasn't such a thing as a poet sitting down to compose a story in writing. Instead, storytelling was a spoken tradition, often carried by specially trained people. They didn't just recite facts, they were guardians of knowledge who kept the history, legends, and laws of the empire alive through memory and performance. As for the quipus, scientists today can understand the numerical parts fairly well. We know how different knots and their positions represented numbers in a base 10 system, but beyond that, whether some quipus may have contained actual stories or coded messages, we are still not sure. The system is incredibly complex, using color, spacing, twist direction, and more. Some researchers believe there might be a deeper language hidden in the knots, but without a translation key, much of it remains a fascinating mystery. So if the Incas themselves did not write anything down, how did their stories survive and how do we know about them today? This is where things get complicated. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 1500s, they brought with them not just weapons and horses, but a very different worldview, one rooted in Christianity. The Spanish destroyed many temples, executed leaders, and banned native religious practices. The oral stories of the Incas were branded as pagan or heretical, which meant that many of the myths vanished entirely, or in the best case, they were absorbed and changed to fit into a Christian framework. Luckily, a few native and mestizo writers recorded some of the Incas' stories, often decades later. A mestizo being a person of mixed descent, both European and indigenous. The most famous of these is Garcilaso de la Vega, the son of a Spanish conquistador and an Inca noblewoman. He realized that if no one wrote down the ancient stories of the ancestors of his mother, they would quickly be lost. So, in his book, Comentarios Reales de los Incas, he wrote down the oral traditions of his Inca ancestors, trying to preserve their worldview before it disappeared completely. Of course, we have to read these sources with caution. They were shaped by their authors' positions, biases, and the colonial context in which they were written, but without them, we might know almost nothing about Inca mythology at all. So now let's take a look at what has been preserved of the Inca stories and mythology. By no means it is a complete account of everything there once was to know about their religion, but it is simply the closest we can get. The Inca creation story. The Incas believed that the world had been created by a supreme god named Viracocha. According to the myth, in the beginning the world was just darkness. Viracocha rose from the waters of Lake Titicaca and created the heavens, the earth, the sun, and the moon. He shaped the first humans out of stone, but they disobeyed him, and disappointed, he destroyed them in a great flood and started over. This second attempt was the creation of the Inca people. Then Viracocha disappeared across the ocean, promising to return one day. This myth says a lot about how the Incas saw the world. The universe wasn't random, it was crafted with intention by a divine being. The natural world wasn't just scenery, it was sacred. Mountains, rivers, stars, all were filled with spiritual power. The pantheon of the Inca gods. While Viracocha was the creator god, he wasn't the only one worshipped. The Inca religion was polytheistic, meaning they believed in many gods, each tied to nature, the elements, and their daily lives. The most important deity in everyday life was Inti, the sun god. The Sapa Inca, the emperor, claimed to be the literal son of Inti, which gave him divine authority. Inti was honored with elaborate temples, the most important one being the Coricancha in Cusco, where everything, from the walls to the altars, was covered in gold. Then there was Pachamama, or Mother Earth, who was deeply venerated by farmers and rural communities. She was the giver of food, fertility, and life, but she also needed to be respected. Natural disasters or poor harvests were often seen as signs she had been offended. Other important gods included Mama Cuila, the moon goddess and protector of women, Ilapa, the god of rain, thunder, and war, Cochamama, the goddess of the sea, and Supai, the god of death and the underworld. Note that these deities weren't distant figures. People interacted with them constantly through rituals, offerings, festivals, and even human sacrifices in rare and important ceremonies. The Inca view of the afterlife. The Incas had a very practical and moral view of the afterlife. They believed that after death, the soul would travel to either a warm, sunny paradise if you had lived a good, honest life, or to a cold, dark underworld if you had lied or acted selfishly. This dualism between warmth and cold, light and dark reflected the Inca worldview. Life was about balance, and your actions had real consequences, not just in this life, but in the next. Burial customs show how seriously the Incas took the afterlife. Important individuals were mummified and their mummies were treated as living beings. They were fed, clothed, and even consulted on political decisions long after death. Some were even taken out to the festivals and processions. So, in a way, death didn't mean the end for the Incas. It meant transformation into a different kind of presence. The Incas also made use of myths to make sense of natural phenomena, just like many ancient civilizations. For instance, they believed the Milky Way was a celestial river that mirrored sacred rivers on Earth. Eclipses were battles between the sun and moon, or signs of cosmic imbalance. And many of their sacred sites, called huacas, were tied to mythological events, believed to be places where gods once walked or where ancestors had turned into stone. One well-known myth tells of Manco Capac and Mama Oclo, the legendary children of the sun, sent by Inti to bring order to the chaos of the world. They emerged from Lake Titicaca with a golden staff. Wherever the staff sank into the ground easily, that would be the center of their new civilization. Eventually, it sank in the valley of Cusco, and that became the heart of the Inca Empire. This myth gave a sacred origin to the city and justified the rule of the Sapa Inca as chosen by the gods. So, in Inca belief, the universe was a living, breathing system. Everything was connected: gods, people, animals, the land, the stars, and even the dead. Their myths weren't just stories, they were the foundation of how the Incas understood their place in the world. And while the Spanish conquest severely disrupted the transmission of these stories, echoes of them still survive today in oral traditions, festivals, and the beliefs of modern Andean communities. Even today, modern Quechua communities, descendants of the Incas, still celebrate festivals, make offerings to Pachamama, and pass down traditional stories. Even after centuries of suppression, Inca myths continue to live on, not just as historical curiosities, but as a living cultural expression. Last year, I had the opportunity to visit the area where centuries ago the Inca people had lived. For 4 days, I traveled to the high Andean mountains in Peru. Together with 3 good friends of mine, we were able to experience the same natural beauty and look upon the same mountains the Inca people looked upon. Our travel ended when we reached Machu Picchu, which is today regarded as the main accomplishment of the Incas. But to me and to my friends, the journey through the mountains was 1,000 times more valuable and insightful to understand the world of the Incas. Our guide was a far descendant of the Inca people, and he told us many interesting stories, not just of the Inca people, but also about the descendants who still to this day inhabit these overwhelming mountains.